Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the seminar commemorating 5 years of the Marrakesh Declaration. Its central message, the rights of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim-majority communities, is now of particular actuality. We have an interesting 2 hours ahead of us with several eminent speakers shedding light on different aspects of this theme. My name is Anja Toivola-Stambouli, and I will be acting as moderator of this event. Together with me here is Miina Noroila. She is the communications officer of the USKOT-foorumi, and her role is to ensure that this online seminar runs without technical surprises. No niin, there is Miina. I would also remind us that the event will be streamed and can be watched using a YouTube link. Now or else later. Regarding comments and questions, I ask you to save them to the end of the seminar, when time is allocated for discussion. I will briefly introduce each speaker before inviting him or her to speak. So now we can start. Our first speaker is Mr. Atiq Ali, who will open the seminar. Mr. Ali is a longtime member of the board of the National Forum for Cooperation of Religions in Finland. Since many years, Mr. Ali was board member and later chair of the Finnish Islamic Congregation. He is the Muslim Network and serves on the advisory board of the International Human Rights of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Ali is Master of Laws by occupation. He will now present the organizer, the USKOT-foorumi, and give some background to the Marrakesh Declaration. Ali is having some technical assistance right now.
No, we're fine, thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you to this seminar commemorating 5 years of Marrakesh Declaration. CORE, National Forum for the Cooperation of Religions in Finland, was founded in 2011. Hence, this seminar is a part of the 10th anniversary celebration. The forum brings together 3 religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Forum's founding member communities are the Central Council of Jewish Communities in Finland, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland, the Finnish Ecumenical Council, the Finnish Islamic Congregation, and the Islamic Council of Finland. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Finland and the Finnish Buddhist Union are currently observer members of the forum. According to the Articles of Association, the purpose of the forum is to foster peace in Finnish society in the spirit of strengthening freedom of religion. What this means in practice is that we organize seminars such as this one in collaboration with the Ministry of the Interior of Finland in 2016. And we have organized, in addition to this, several cultural events. COR-forum has its board as well as 5 commissions. And here I have mentioned two of those commissions, those being the Human Rights Commission and the Equal Rights Commission, which latter includes also the gender equality issues. Why? Because the 2 commissions are contextually involved in today's theme. And the members of the commission, we consider ourselves to be human rights defenders. In addition to aforementioned, we have drafted submissions and statements. This one is from last February concerning, it is a submission concerning International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and it was addressed to the Human Rights Committee. In this statement, we pointed out some of the key issues, those being freedom of religion, hate speech, and in particular, the dietary restrictions of religious minorities in Finland. And now to the main topic, the Marrakesh Declaration. The initiative of organizing this seminar on the Marrakesh Declaration came from the then chair of COR, Bishop Carlo Kaljala, who in collaboration with Mr. Carlo Yrttiaho had translated the declaration into Finnish language. The declaration was made in a conference in 2016. The conference was organized and held under the patronage of the Ministry of Endowments and Islamic Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco, and the conference was held in conjunction with the Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies, which is hosted and supported by the government of United Arab Emirates. The declaration consists of 3 main bodies. The first one being invoking the universal principles and comprehensive values of Islam. And I have written down here some of the values, which, as you can see and observe, that have a lot in common with, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, other human rights conventions, fundamental rights. These are practically those which we have nowadays as well. The numbers state the chapter and the verse of the Holy Quran. And the main one, and number 1, is of course human dignity. And number 2, there is no compulsion in religion, which is also stated to be as the freedom of choice. Then we have equality, justice, peace, mercy, treating others kindly, honoring contracts. Second part, considering the Charter of Medina the basis and foundation for ensuring the rights of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim lands. And here I have written down some main principles in the declaration, those being freedom of religion, freedom of movement, freedom of own property, social solidarity, justice and equality before the law. And as you can see, these all align well with the Charter of United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which came like 1400 years later. And the third one, correcting misunderstandings and clarifying the methodological principles of the Islamic legal position on the rights of minorities. And as Anja earlier mentioned, this is of vital importance, especially at the current situation. And here I have taken from the Marrakesh Declaration, from the text, the consideration of the universal values of sacred law, such as wisdom, mercy, justice, and the commonweal, the adoption of comprehensive approach, the consideration of perspectives and contexts. The declaration concludes, and finally, we affirm that this is unconscionable to use religion as a false justification to aggress upon the rights of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim lands. This is my brief presentation of Core Forum and the declaration. I once again welcome you all to this seminar, and I hope that we have a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. And now we proceed to our next speaker, who is Pekka Haavisto, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me well? Yes, thank you. Mr. Haavisto is a long-time member of the Finnish Parliament representing the Green Party. He has served as Minister of Development and Environment and as Minister of International Development. His wide international experience includes different UN and EU roles in the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Liberia, occupied Palestinian territory, and Sudan. Mr. Haavisto has sent a video message to this seminar. It should be noted, however, that the message was produced in February this year, which is the time when the seminar was originally planned to be held.
Distinguished participants of the forum, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to address the National Forum for Cooperation of Religions. As Finland, we take value in having this forum, which in the spirit of strengthening religious freedom promotes interreligious dialogue, equality, mutual respect, and cooperation. The forum creates an understanding of religious cooperation as a positive resource in society. The forum is also an internationally exemplary model highlighting the uniting role of religion and religious authorities in peace building. In foreign policy, we need to understand the ways how religion matters, not only as a human right, but also as a driver, identity marker, and worldview. Given the importance of this angle, religious authorities play a crucial role. When they act as opinion leaders and work together, they can influence positively the broader society. This is a key contribution. Setting aside prejudices and fears in societies is a necessity for trust, for peace building, and for lasting peace. This work is supported by our cooperation with the network of religious and traditional peacemakers. The network has achieved commendable results in peace building in many countries, and its role in peace building is much appreciated. FELM is another Finnish organization worth mentioning for their key contribution in this specific field. The Ministry for Foreign Affairs supports and works closely with peacemaking actors, especially through its newly established Center for Peace Mediation. We understand very well that the results can only be achieved in close partnership with other actors like religious leaders, authorities and grassroots workers. For us, all human rights are equally important. This is reflected in Finland's human rights-based foreign policy. We must protect the freedom of religion and belief of all persons of all faiths and beliefs. Lately, we have seen worrying trends in Europe and elsewhere, with attacks against religious communities on the rise. We must be united in our fight against terrorism and violent extremism in all its forms. You are gathered to mark the Marrakesh Declaration, an important element in the discussion on Islam and human rights. I wish you fruitful deliberations and all to the best to the valuable work of the National Forum for Cooperation of Religions. Thank you.
And now our next speaker, Ambassador Timo Heino, will in fact talk about what the minister just mentioned, namely the Center for Peace Mediation of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the religious dimension of this center. Ambassador Heino has a diplomatic career that extends over 30 years. Included are several embassies in the Nordic countries, Central Europe, Southeastern Europe, and Asia. His latest duty abroad was of being Finland's ambassador to Cyprus. Ambassador Heino, I will give you the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the discussions of this seminar. I really look forward to meeting you all in person, hopefully not in too distant future. It would be very nice to get to know you, the members of the core and other people, and learn from you and hear your views and opinions about all this which we are discussing. But anyhow, this is very good that this event takes place because it's a suitable time to commemorate the Marrakesh Declaration, also thinking about the challenges of the devastating humanitarian crisis caused by the pandemic of COVID-19. But before turning into the pandemic, I would like to introduce some of my first observations as the new ambassador for cultural and religious dialogue at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. As I have studied my new job, it has been remarkable to see how closely religion is connected to different kinds of international and national developments. The role of religion in international politics is indeed more topical than ever, witnessed also by a wealth of academic conferences, studies, and papers. When analyzing the role of religion, I have understood that we can usually look at it at least from two different interrelated angles. There are more, of course, but just to mention two. First, of course, one can and must analyze the general role of religions, religious traditions, religious trends in relation to different kinds of political and economic developments. Secondly, one needs to find out possibilities how to support the positive role of religious leaders and actors, especially in crisis areas and conflicts. In my job, the angle is mostly the latter, namely to look at religion from a peace mediation perspective, as I am a member of the newly established Center of Peace Mediation. I will come to the center a bit later, but at first I would like to point out the overall starting point which is clear to me. We are witnessing an increasing religious dimension in many kinds of international developments and conflicts. In addition to conflicts between countries, international tensions and conflicts within states demand more attention. And when turning this attention to proper analysis, we need to remember that many scholars report that religion has a role to play in one way or another, even in up to 60% of conflicts in the world. 60%. That is why we need to strengthen in foreign policy and peace mediation our collective understanding of religions in world politics. In other words, we need more religious literacy and deeper understanding of faith-based actors. What motivates them, how they operate, what is their role, positive or negative, in broader peace and conflict dynamics, etc. These are crucial issues. But during my first months, I've been soon doing 1 year this job, I have understood also that the relationship between religion and diplomacy is a complicated and a broad issue. When we approach this theme by looking at different dimensions of religion in conflicts especially, we see that it can be either a divider or a connector. When a religion is a driver in a conflict, then it can shape the issue as identity marker or as worldview. By identity marker, we refer to situations where political regimes divide populations along sectarian lines, or when popular movements mobilize along sectarian lines. On the other hand, when a worldview plays a decisive role, we usually see an interstate conflict over the nature of state and society. These two elements, identity marker and or worldview, creates different kinds of dynamics of religion in conflicts, and this is crucial that we understand these kinds of different dynamics. Identity markers or worldviews can function both as dividers or connectors, and of course, both understanding the potential of both elements is very crucial. As we have seen, identity politics is more important than ever, and it will not most probably disappear, on the contrary. Well, this is just an example how we try to analyze religious or faith-based dynamics in conflicts. I should like to mention that I'm not the only one here in the ministry who is doing this. I have a colleague also who is mainly responsible on freedom of religion or belief, and a third one who is doing working with terrorism and extremism, and a fourth one who is working with Holocaust issues. All these has, of course, strong religious elements. So we are several, and my job, as I mentioned, is more the dialogue, peace mediation part of this. But of course, I'm following all the main developments very intensively as best as I can. Turning to pandemic, we see that unfortunately the pandemic has deepened many local conflicts in many ways, endangering human rights, democratic development, and well-being of citizens. Many conflicts were complicated enough, of course, already before conflict, and we have not yet seen the dust settle. Anyhow, it is clear that this negative trend has taken place locally, intrastate, or regionally. And looking at the reaction of faith-based actors, we can already see that in COVID crisis, there has been different kinds of responses. We have seen many religious groups respond to this unprecedented moment in constructive ways with solidarity and ingenuity, very valuable. Unfortunately, some religious or faith-inspired groups have responded much less constructively, fueling social tensions and suspicion towards medical experts and public officials. The lockdowns have also raised a debate on the acceptable limits on freedom of religion or belief. All those restrictions were and are, of course, in principle legitimate when they are based on public health grounds. But some restrictions on religion have been excessive or discriminatory, discriminatory amidst the general lockdowns, and especially those in vulnerable positions have further suffered. One consequence of the pandemic is that peace mediation is even more difficult than before. We have a big challenge ahead of us. We need to approach the problems together in many ways. I take up here just two important angles. One has to remember that during the pandemic, it's been very difficult to do any kinds of peace mediation on grassroots level because of the obvious distractions, and mainly it has been done virtually, which has of course all kinds of limitations, and there is nothing which can replace in-person contact in conflicts and trust building especially. But as I said, we have a big challenge, and I just when we are tackling this, I just take up here two angles. Firstly, the protection of freedom of religion and belief. As my minister already pointed out, our Finnish foreign policy is human rights based, and for us all human rights are equally important. And he underlined that the freedom of religion or belief of all persons of all faiths and beliefs must be protected. As one central human right, we need to understand better all dimensions of freedom of religion or belief. And this is why we will do more internal training on this matter in the ministry as part of our overall training of peace mediation. This is part of our response to the question of religious literacy, which I mentioned earlier. Secondly, regarding our responses to peace mediation, which I have mentioned already a couple of times, we don't start from scratch here in the foreign ministry, because in the past 10 years we have consistently strengthened the position of mediation at international and national levels. But now, 1 year ago, we decided to boost the implementation of peace mediation and set up a new center for mediation under the ministry's political department. The center aims to strengthen Finland's expertise and capacity in mediation matters, and we intend to coordinate the activities internally in a more systematic manner, as well as support our collaboration with other actors and partners. This is also because we know that mediation requires a broad cooperation at several levels between states, international and other organizations, informal actors on grassroots levels. This is important, and namely the idea of peace mediation should not be misunderstood too narrowly. It is not only about direct talks between parties in conflict, even if they are the essence of it, of course, but the broader concept is needed. Sustainable peace can only be built by tackling also the underlying causes of conflicts that lead to political, economic, and social problems. This is why the link to broader development cooperation and humanitarian assistance is important. This also includes the understanding the potential of religion. Religious leaders and actors have a hugely important role in building trust and dialogue in societies. In our daily work, we at the Peace Mediation Center support peace mediation efforts in many concrete ways. And just to give us some examples, for instance, we give different kinds of advice to our colleagues internally and partners externally based on our expertise. We can also host confidential or public meetings and conferences here in Finland or abroad. Financing is also important. We support NGOs in Finland or abroad, and through them support different kinds of confidence building measures in many critical locations, especially in Africa, Asia, and also Middle East and Europe, something also in Latin America. An important element in our work is to benefit from the best potential of religious and cultural dialogue. We highly appreciate our cooperation with the network of religious and traditional peacemakers run by Finn Church Aid, as my minister already mentioned. The network has achieved remarkable results, and it is an impressive resource because it comprises nowadays already some 80 different kinds of organizations and a great number of peace mediators working in the field, literally on the grassroots level. I have met these people in many video conferences. They are really impressive people who do a very valuable job there deep in the conflict zones, and they have had a hard time during COVID crisis, but they still keep going on, and we try our best to support them, and we hope that soon we can also travel. I myself can travel and see them and try to find possibilities to support them as best as we can. So this network is a very valuable asset to Finland, and also internationally very interesting to my colleagues, for example, and I'm happy to and proud to inform them about the activities of this network. There are also other partners, religious partners for us, like FELM in the field of religion. So this is a brief overview what we are doing, and I can tell you that we have a very nice resources and very exemplary models here in Finland in this field, and one of them is indeed the National Forum for Cooperation of Religions, CORE, USKOT. It is indeed in my daily job a valuable asset that we have this kind of forum. There is an international great need of functioning models for interreligious dialogue, equality, mutual respect, and cooperation. And I have taken every opportunity to share the idea of this forum with my foreign colleagues and other foreign audiences, and I'm happy to report that their responses has been very positive, and they usually demand more information and background. So I want to thank you, CORE, for a very valuable job. It is very helpful, your existence, your job is very helpful to me also in my daily job, and I wish all the best for the forum, and look forward to discussing with you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for these very interesting informations and comments. And of course, USKOT-foorumi wants to do all the best it can to deliver to your good wishes. Our next speaker is Mr. Tuomas Martikainen, who is a university lecturer in cultural anthropology at the University of Eastern Finland. He gained his PhD in comparative religion and has since worked as a researcher and professor of ethnic relations at the University of Helsinki. He has also been director of the Migration Institute of Finland. His areas of expertise include immigrant religions and migrant integration. He has also published widely on these topics. Dr. Martikainen will speak on Muslims and freedom of religion in Western Europe. Dr. Martikainen, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm honored to be invited as a speaker to this important seminar commemorating the Marrakesh Declaration and the 5 years of it. My sincere hope is that my following remarks will be worthy for your attention and further considerations. However, as I'm an empirically minded person, and not a theologian of either Islam or Christianity, my approach will be based on the lived reality of people. To that I shall add some few theoretical considerations and research findings on this important topic of freedom of religion among Muslims in Europe. But let us ask first, what is freedom of religion and what do we understand by it? Well, like with many other issues, so there is no consensus on the topic. I will myself now follow the road set by the political scientist Jonathan Fox, who is a professor of religion and politics at the Department of Political Science at Bar Ilan University, Tel Aviv, Israel. There are, of course, many others whom I could have chosen, but there's one particular reason why I think that Professor Fox will be my and our guide today. He has actually been following the development of religious freedom globally through a huge number of different measures for the past approximately 30 years. He's less, in a way, interested of the ideologies of religious freedom itself, but rather of the outcomes, how states and other actors are dealing with it. And therefore, he has a broad definition of the matter that helps us to take a bird's eye view on a global scale. And when we look around the world, I'm quite sure that somewhere along the way we will also find ourselves and our societies. So what does he look at? Well, something that is perhaps the most important issue for us today has to do what he calls for religious discrimination. By that he means limitations placed on religious practices or institutions of minority religions that are not placed on the majority religion. Okay, complex words aside, but basically this is a question when we treat minorities differently from the religious majority. And what does it include? It may take such forms as, for example, limiting public expression of religion, for example, dress. It might be something like hindering building religious buildings for Muslims, mosques in Europe. It might have to do with limiting proselytization. That means, telling of one's religion to others. That might not in general be so topical directly in the West European context. And it also may include targeted surveillance, monitoring of particular communities that are considered for some reason or another by public authorities as suspicious. To me, all this sounds very familiar on research looking at Islam in Europe, but we'll return to that later. Now, what I think that is healthy reminder from Fox to us that there are religious restrictions that actually apply to any and all religion. So they are in that sense not differential treatment to, for example, minority religions. What these could be, for example, inability to access the political process. It might be related to public education of religion at schools, and it might have to do with the availability of certain religious diets and so on. However, this is, from the religious point of view, oppression of religion rather in general than in particular. So now we have talked about religious discrimination against minorities, restrictions, religious restrictions in general, and then the last thing that is taken up in this context is freedom from religion. In a way, the negative freedom of religion, which again includes just about anything we can imagine has to do with human life. But for example, a religious minority sanctions that non-religious people may not, for example, use certain products, whatever it is. Now, what Fox has actually been doing is that looking through a long list. I think he has something like more than 100 different items that he has been looking in all the countries of the world from which he has found this material, and thereafter looked also through time, how this has changed over the time. And I'll return to that in a minute. But before I do that, I'm not a book marketing person, but I will just show you this big volume because I reviewed it earlier this year. It's a yearbook of Muslims in Europe. It's a fantastic treasure trove to anyone who is interested on this topic. It provides annual reports of Muslim communities in almost 50 countries. And sort of tells what happens in different countries. And this book that I just reviewed, it covers the year 2019. It's the last one that has been published. And I'll just give you some examples. So, for example, it reminded us of a social media row that took place in France, where a large sports retailer called Decathlon announced that it starts to sell sports hijabs, which created a lot of trouble in social media. These sort of things that take place. It also told the news about how to the local government in Limerick, Ireland, Abul Kalam and Azad Talukar were selected as the first Muslim representatives. Something that perhaps does not make the headline news around the world, but an example of a process whereby people of minority communities, in this case, gradually become embedded in local political processes and government. It also told how in December 2019, the state of Norway decided on an action plan against discrimination and hate speech against Muslims, whereby it was launched. Again, some news that perhaps don't make the headlines across Europe. But while I was reading the Yearbook of Muslims in Europe, it really struck me, well, on the one hand, that how, in a way, different histories we find across the continent in different countries. Remember that it has entries from Azerbaijan to Ireland and Portugal. So a lot of different stories, a lot of national particularities, local rows, troubles, whatever life brings with us. But there was another storyline that you could observe in just about everywhere. And of course, we know this already, but it sort of struck me once again how strong it is. How global, often global news provide a kind of like storyline, meta-narrative of what Islam is or how it is seen through the simple amount of repetition that we find in the news throughout the year and the years. And in this narrative, in this sort of story of the world presented in Western Europe, Islam is often as part of the problem, not part of the solution. And even though the national examples that are provided in this yearbook, which are indeed many, several hundreds of pages of information in this one only, so even though the local stories are often quite different, there is something in the background that seems quite similar. And I return to that in a minute. But what I just said, it reminds me of when I was doing my PhD interviews about 20 years ago, almost. I met with an Iraqi man. He was originally, I think he was an an asylum seeker. He was working at the university, and he told me that, Tuomas, you know, if I read something in the news or I see something in the news today, I see it in the eyes of the Finns tomorrow. And by that, he was meaning that how massive is the effect of the visual image, the stories that travel across the globe. And this is perhaps, I think, from a subjective point of view, the main reason why why Muslim communities often take up the notion of media in Western countries, that they don't feel that they are fairly treated. Okay, but what about Finland then? I think it's fair to say that in Finland, the majority religion, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland, has a special place in a number of ways. But most religions, including the majority church, feel that their own voice is not heard enough in society. Minority religions are treated somewhat differently in this country too, for example, regarding issues of funding. So we find, simply speaking, that Finland is not a perfect place either. But when you look more broadly at the Western Europe, we see that okay, there are different systems. I don't need to go into detail with this because you are international people. You know these from your own experiences. Still, in many places, Muslims are seen as unwanted newcomers, even though they have been there sometimes for more than half a century. Some places even much longer. The key trouble, and this is what I'm saying from Jonathan Fox's empirical findings on legal restrictions all around the world, including Western Europe, what he's basically saying that 9/11, which started the global war on terror, and thereby leading to heightened and increased secularization of Islamic communities, Muslim communities in Western Europe, indeed has had a very long-lasting effect. Many of these restrictions, which come in all kinds of forms, including surveillance by state authorities to difficulties in international money transfer for various purposes, are indeed many. So what happened 20 years ago, and in a way it's just a couple of days since the commemoration of 9/11, it is a very long legacy, and it still seems to be still there. Of course, there are other things that have happened in between. Now, back to the global bird's eye view, and this is now my finishing lines. On a global scale, Western Europe is actually doing quite well in terms of freedom of religion, but we should not be self-congratulatory in this issue. We see a lot of different types of problems, some of which I mentioned, and most of all, it does not make a discriminated person who is living in a particular society happier to know that there might be some people somewhere else who have it worse. We should not accept that, and rather we should focus on the here and now. And in this way, I think one of the first steps should be to start lessening, worrying about Islam and security in Europe. Of course, there are legitimate concerns, but we should not give this label to a whole group of people. And in this effort, I believe that also the Marrakesh Declaration will support in finding us the way. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martikainen, for these very interesting insights into this question. I would now like to invite, or rather present first, our next speaker, who is Ambassador Nora Juma from the United Arab Emirates. As we know, her country was among the initiators of this Marrakesh Declaration, or actually the meeting that led to the Marrakesh Declaration. Mrs. Juma is her country's ambassador to Finland since 2017. Before taking up her current post, she served as the Consul General in Milan, Italy, and in Shanghai, China. Mrs. Juma holds an executive master's degree in business administration and a degree in finance and banking. Ambassador Juma, you have now the floor.
Thank you so much, Anya, for the introduction. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, distinguished speakers and guests. It's a pleasure to be a part of this virtual meeting to celebrate and honor Marrakesh Declaration and its translation into Finnish language. I think in today's world, this declaration is more important than ever. And of course, there is definitely a need to see a wider implementation of its spirit. We should be thankful for this declaration, for giving back to humans their birthright to be respected and protected as individuals, regardless of their religion or culture. I'm especially honored to represent United Arab Emirates, an open Muslim country that truly implements the values of religious freedom. Since the formation of our country in 1971, for 50 years now, our government has been committed to encouraging different values of inclusion, harmonious coexistence, and of course, implementing laws that guarantee freedom of worship to everybody. Those values are really embedded in our society, which is why it is a lived reality in the UAE that the diverse population that represents 200 nationalities and different faiths, they live and worship peacefully side by side. There are a lot of examples and facts that reflect the country's recognition of the importance to promote the interfaith tolerance, both domestically and internationally. And maybe in other meetings, we will be able to tackle those initiatives and facts and examples. To include my brief greeting, I would like to express my thanks and gratitude for this important gathering. And I hope that one day we all will be able to use the faith that we believe in to bring more peace to ourselves and to the people around us, and also to feel and benefit from the richness of the differences of humanity in different fields, including religion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now we will have the ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco, Mr. Mohammed Ashkelou, who is also a career diplomat, who served in different places, including Frankfurt, Germany, and as a counselor at missions to the UN in Geneva and New York, and in Libya. He has also served as head of human rights and humanitarian division in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco. Mr. Ashkelou holds a master's degree in public law and human rights. So, Ambassador Ashkelou, you are, in a way, the host ambassador of this declaration. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you for all the energy that the forum put in this to organize this meeting. It's timely and it's very important when we see what's happening in Afghanistan again, and also coincides with the events of 9/11 terror attacks that we all hope that we will never see this again anymore in our world. During the last 5 years, the Marrakesh Declaration received indeed a lot of positive response from all over the world. And I think in the next coming 5 years, it will be, the declaration will be a great opportunity for the protection of minorities, religious minorities. This is the reason why I personally think that the translation of the content and the message of the declaration into the Finnish language, and also the holding of events such as this seminar, is very important and crucial to, first of all, to disseminate the message and to promote the declaration, and so on, to straighten the misunderstanding and to clear up the stereotypes about the religion and the spiritual living of all religions, of course. As a proposal, I think, however, there is some issues for implementation of the declaration and its objectives. I think that it should be, as a proposal, it should be promoted more in the multilateral forums. And in this regard, I think that Morocco and Finland could do work together as candidate members to the Human Rights Council to do something in this sense. So I think that we can work together, and also, of course, including our partner and United Arab Emirates or any other members that could join such initiatives in the multilateral forum, especially in New York and Geneva, where people gather actually on rights of minorities and vulnerable groups. The other issue that I would like to highlight this morning is that the holding of the conference, the January 2016 conference in Marrakesh, holds a very important symbolism for Morocco. First of all, because it is held under the auspices of His Majesty the King, Mohammed himself, not the patronage of the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. And this is very, has a certain symbolism. Morocco has always been an outstanding model of tolerance, openness, cultural coexistence, and interaction between Islam and other religions. I personally grew up in an open and inclusive society, guided by a moderate Islam, an authentic Islam, and an open Islam that has long been deep-rooted in our identity and the culture. I grew up in a society where every single person is more identified by being a human, and then the other considerations, including the religion, counts. Allow me, I know that I have the opportunity only to give a greetings, but I see that Mr. Costas is not yet here, so I will take some time more, if you allow me, of course, and would like to build actually on the very important input, academic input by Mr. Tuomas. My opinion, it is very important. I think now that the Marrakesh Declaration has put basis, important basis for securing the human rights of religious minorities in where they are considered as such. I think now it is time to also think, to consider an initiative, a similar initiative about all the minorities, including Muslims, whatever they are considered as such. And here I would like to draw attention to the some behaviors on the internet, and even not only in the internet, but out of that, during the weekend we have seen that flag of ISIS somewhere here in Helsinki, and that coincides with the the commemoration of 9/11 events, which take hold, in my personal view, a very dangerous act. And this is happening here, but every day it happens on the internet. And I think it is time that we shift focus and everywhere in Europe and the whole world, focus on the hate speech on the internet, online. Unfortunately, it is allowed, and there is sometimes for the sake of freedom of expression that we fully support. I think that we can find the balance between the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and also to secure the human rights of other societies and other minorities by, for example, adopting the rights legislative framework to protect or to monitor what's happening on the internet, because now we noticed that there is a relaxed attitude towards some people that use the internet and use the conditions of freedom and human rights to disseminate or to disseminate messages of hatred against the within the populations and against other minorities and people and also society. In this regard, I think the Marrakesh Declaration, as I already said, has put very useful guidelines, and we have to think in the next future about the challenges to the rights of minorities that are present everywhere. Extremist and populist movements seriously threaten human rights and fundamental freedoms of vulnerable groups. As I already mentioned, the apology of radicalism and hatred is gaining a wide virtual space on the internet, where it is unfortunately allowed sometimes only for very simple political reasons or motivations. Finally, I think there is a reference that we can use on the matter. There is a resolution that was adopted by the UN General Assembly. Its number is 73/328. It's about the promoting of interreligious and intercultural dialogue and tolerance in countering hate speech. It was adopted on 25th of July by almost the majority of the United Nations members. It's a very important reference on that. It was actually presented by Morocco, which once again is a testimony of our engagement and pledges towards the human rights of the minorities. I think even if I follow Mr. Costa, I think he is here. And I give you back the floor. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your contribution to to this important discussion, and also for taking up this issue, which has has been also on the agenda of the Forum for Religions here, namely the hate speech and hate speech in social media. It is important that we find a way to deal with that, as we are trying to find a way to also to undo the labeling of religious groups as terrorists, whole populations and groups. Now, as you mentioned, we seemingly continue to have a technical problem concerning the next speaker, who, according to our program, is Dr. Ahmed Kostas, head of the Department of Islamic Affairs at the Ministry of Religious Endowments and Islamic Affairs in Rabat, Morocco. I will briefly introduce Dr. Kostas, and if we catch up with him later, we will then take him on to the program as he appears. Dr. Kostas holds a degree in Islamic law and a doctorate in Islamic higher studies. He is someone who has organized and participated in a large number of roundtables, seminars, and religious intercultural issues, both in Morocco and in the United States. He has also produced TV and radio programs and several publications. His topic that we have been eagerly waiting for is to hear about the first steps toward the implementation of the Marrakesh Declaration. In the meantime, and waiting to establish the connection with Dr. Kostas, I would like to invite our next speaker, after briefly introducing him, that is Bishop Carlo Kalliala. He is now the Bishop Emeritus of Turku, and as we heard before, it's him that we must thank for taking the initiative of translating the Marrakesh Declaration into the Finnish language. Bishop Kalliala has served as Bishop of the Turku Archdiocese of the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church from 2011 until this year. During this time, he acted as chair of the newly established Committee for Encounter Between Religions. He also served as vice chair and later as chair of the USKOT-foorumi. In addition, he was member of the European Council of Religious Leaders, which is affiliated to the Religions for Peace network. Bishop Kalliala will talk about the importance of religious dialogue and the rights of minorities. Bishop Kalliala, you have now the floor.
We cannot hear you.
Now, are you hearing me now?
Now.
All right. So, Excellencies and dear participants, while I was preparing this address, I came to read a book on humorous anecdotes that was published some time ago. And this particular story caught my eye. I quote, "So it happened at the peace conference of the world's religious leaders. The leaders reached an agreement on a common basic essence of each represented religion, namely that they all would protect and cherish life. After the meeting, when everyone was to depart to their home destinations, an Iranian imam said goodbye to an Italian cardinal at the airport, saying, 'Yes, good friend, after all, we both serve the same God. You in your own way, and I in his way.'" So anecdotes are what they are, and they are not expected to be quite true, but in this particular one, the Peace Conference of Religious Leaders and the two representatives of their respective religions could, however, be real. It could even be so that the story originated from St. Egidio's annual peace prayer. Less pertinent is the impression given between the lines that the meeting would have produced a joint statement about some common basic background essence behind the existing religions. An interfaith dialogue with such outcome is hardly practiced by religious leaders. Even the punchline is not very credible. Perhaps the story has been a quip or just for laughs from the beginning. Whatever the exact nature of the anecdote, it nevertheless does leave us with the notion that engaging in an interfaith dialogue does not require relativizing one's own religion. It is not possible to engage in interfaith dialogue without becoming aware and recognizing distinctions and even differences between religious traditions. This is not foreign to religions themselves. For example, it holds true that the Abrahamic religions have from time to time been accused of disturbing or even breaking peace because they most evidently include the idea of serving the true God, and evidently in his way. But as it is laid out in different ways in the Holy Scriptures of these religious traditions, difference is recognized and its value even in some manner understood. The Marrakesh Declaration on the rights of minorities in predominantly Muslim majority communities, issued by Muslim scholars and politicians, quotes a well-known passage from 49th Surah. "People, we have made you male and female and made you peoples and tribes so that you can get to know each other." As for the declaration, it states on this basis that, I quote, "People are brothers in humanity, regardless of natural, societal, or ideological differences." On the other hand, a recent document from the Episcopal Conference of the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church, Guidelines for Meeting Religions from 2020, points out that more than once Jesus set such a person as an example of faith who did not belong to the people of Israel and did not profess that particular faith. The examples from the Old Testament, of course, we share with Judaism as they are part of our common tradition. The church document states, "Some Old Testament accounts also show a broader understanding of God who affects all people, cultures, and traditions." The central focus of interfaith dialogue is more or less, of course, peace. Throughout its 10 years of work, the National Forum for Cooperation of Religions in Finland, CORE, has underlined this very aim. It is a question of local, social, and societal peace on one hand, and of promoting wider culture of peace on the other. I quote the Omani Minister of Religion, Sheikh Abdullah bin Mohammed Al Salmi, who agrees with the description that was penned by Hans Küng, a theologian who just died last spring. They both emphasize the need for interfaith dialogue, and here is the quote. The reformist Catholic thinker Hans Küng, in his work on global ethic and global responsibility, has presented a plan for world peace in three interrelated principles. First, there is no human coexistence without an international morality. Second, there is no peace between nations without peace between religions. And third, there is no peace between world religions without a dialogue between them. In the last few years, the issue of interfaith peace has sharpened into the question of the protection and rights of minorities. This is also very clear in the introduction to the Marrakesh Declaration. Perhaps the most important background figure to the declaration, Sheikh Abdallah bin Baya, made a reference to the same issue at the 2014 Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies in Abu Dhabi. I quote, "Peace is a right that precedes all others. Everyone has the right to live free from violence and to settle or roam freely. No one can deny another this right or cause it to be denied." Addresses like this, I'm referring to both the Abu Dhabi Forum and the Marrakesh Declaration, are all the more relevant today as the world follows with concern how the Taliban will pursue the human rights, minority, and religious policies in Afghanistan. In this context, I cannot fail to highlight the debate I have followed in many interfaith peace meetings. Time and time again, the media has been criticized for pouring fuel on the fire instead of pouring oil on the waves. Of course, the question is not simple, because in the name of religions, violence is committed, regardless of what the religions and their respective leaders teach. The media cannot be demanded to ignore this in silence. Yet, it is reasonable to ask whether this kind of, so to say, objection journalism or showing the ugly and evil journalism has some special status or role in aggravating religious intolerance. Why not place peaceful actions, kind deeds, and any kind of consensus to the fore? This is also what Dr. Martikainen pays some attention to. If this media is meant to give a wholesome picture of the world we all live in, all these are also an essential and true part of it. Religion-based violence and repression of minorities abound in the world. Interfaith dialogue reveals that the root cause is rarely in the religion itself, whereas more often it can be found either in ignorance or in a completely intentional abuse of religion. The Marrakesh Declaration reminds us, in the words of second surah, that there is no compulsion in religion. The same idea was put forward in almost the same words by the church father Tertullian, who died in 230. I quote, "The practice of religion does not include coercion, for religious faith must not be embraced by coercion, but by free choice." And this is again also confirmed by Augustine, who died about 2 years later, no one can and should be forced to believe. In Finland, there is little or no risk that anyone will be forced into a religion other than their own. The hidden problem, however, may be that an attempt is made to force someone converted to another religion to come back through mental or even physical violence. In Finnish society, the relationship between the majority and the minority appears more as a question of responsibility. The responsibility of the majority religion, that is my own Evangelical Lutheran Church, is without doubt greater in both the dialogue and the defense of minority rights. The resources of our church are substantially greater than those of others, and it must also use them for the benefit of others and the whole. The Evangelical Lutheran Church plays a key role at all levels in fostering interfaith dialogue and such dialogic attitude in Finland. From this vantage point, it can be said that interfaith dialogue is not just about the meetings of religious leaders, as important as they are for the established connection, whereas it is about informal interaction, raising interest, making acquaintances, enabling discussion and mutual sharing. These are especially essential locally, and to be specific, in each neighborhood. Everyday dialogue is central to building community and supporting social and societal peace. In fact, it may be so that what we somewhat solemnly and nobly call peace is in practical terms about the same as undisturbed, casual, everyday life. Of course, peace is also means the absence of and resistance to war and violence. In a peaceful society, however, the emphasis is on the everyday side of peace in amity, partnership, as well as in safe and sound interaction. Seen from within, the world of interfaith dialogue and the friendly encounter between religions is much stronger and ampler than is generally comprehended. A good example about this is the Marrakesh Declaration. Only very few people in Finland are aware about the attitude toward religious minorities in the Islamic world that the declaration insists should be practiced. We have a common mission to make this culture of peace and peaceful encounter more visible. And in doing so, we must work in 3 directions. First, we have a lot to do so that even the active members of our own religious communities understand and feel that they are involved in interfaith dialogue and really see its significance. Second, the building of social and societal peace requires close relations with the public authorities and joint action in that direction. This work has been diligently done by the USKOT-foorumi. And third and final, but not the least direction, is the media. And I mean both the public media and various social media platforms. Unless it is seen and heard that religions want to promote a culture of peace and a culture of understanding, and not a culture of war and confrontation, the abjection journalism, as I mentioned it, will dominate the headlines. At the very beginning, I pointed out that Abrahamic religions in particular are easily accused of disturbing the peace. I will, for this reason, conclude this address with a remark by Chief Rabbi Haim Corsia of France that he presented in an interfaith peace conference. According to the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, I quote, "The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left." Kosia pointed out that the heart of the person who is facing me, just standing in front of me, is on the right. So it is on the right in the sense of being in right, welcoming and accepting Christ. And so it is wise heart that I, along with Kosia, have in mind. I believe it is safe to say that all Abrahamic religions stand firm in maintaining that such heart is the cornerstone for all interfaith dialogue and the respect for minority rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Kalliala. And now a last check. Do we have? No, we do not. We have not found Dr. Kostas. So we will proceed without him, and should he show up, then we will accommodate his intervention. We have now about half an hour's time for questions, answers, discussions, and you are invited to participate actively. Before inviting any speakers, I would like to give a common joint thank you for all our contributing speakers who have given us very many important ideas to think about and to promote them even in our daily lives. For those, now that you will want to participate in the discussion or ask the speakers, you should, I'm looking at where is my, there should be a raise your hand function, right? So please, you find the raise your hand, it should be under reactions. Yes. There is a, Monsieur Ali has raised his hands. You have the floor.
Yes, yes, thank you, Anja. And thank you for all the participants for the very interesting presentations. I have got a question, and this one is, first question is Dr. Tuomas Martikainen. Tuomas, you first in your presentation, you defined or said some words about concerning the definition of freedom of religion, and then you moved to how religious discrimination, the forms of religious discrimination of minority religious group, and then you mentioned that certain forms of discrimination, and among them were religious education and availability of diets. My question is that in the history of Europe, as you told, that Islam is not something new in Europe, that we have had presence of Islam, for example, in Finland, more than 150 years. So how come, what is your opinion on that? We are seeing more and more headlines concerning discrimination of religious education or concerning availability of diets, as well as the third matter, we have had issues concerning male non-medical circumcision in Europe, for example, in Iceland and Denmark, as well as in Finland. What are the reasons, according to your opinion, for this tendency at the moment in Europe? Thank you.
Dr. Martikainen, you would.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm ready. Yes, thank you for the question. I think the easy answer is the rise of anti-Muslim forces in the European public sphere, which use various means that are available and, so to say, as part of the nature of the times in which we are lived, where in these cases that you are referring to, for example, the integrity of the child is taken as a starting point, or rights of animals and whatever. And I think these two issues that I mentioned are, of course, not only related to the rise of the political right that often embraces anti-Muslim ideas, but rather more general. But the reason why they have risen so strongly to the public, in my opinion, is mainly related to this feature.
Do you see a causality in the presence of Islam and presence of Muslims, the increased presence of Muslims in Europe? For example, if we compare the situation between today and like in the 1960s?
I think they are related, but there is not a direct causality from certain numbers to certain political responses, because we can see similar debates going on in countries with very different shares of Muslim populations and with quite distinct histories. So I see that they are related, so that one may support the other, but we cannot find any simple solution that, let's say that when the share of people of Muslim origin rises above 5% of the population, we shall see the following. Political discourse follows a different logic. And it's in a way quite interesting to follow how these ideas travel. One element which sort of relates to this broader picture of not only Islam, but it's a critique that has risen in a number of Western countries towards particular type of so-called critical social sciences that take up issues of racial equality and women's position. And these are also taken up by the same political forces that I refer to as part of a broader cultural program whereby they try to reach their own political goals. So they are related, but I think the unifying force here are two things. On the one hand, we have in certain issues a shared global media space, major political events all around the world that are quite Western dominated. And then on the other hand, we do have extensive networks among various social movements in Europe, where they learn from the rhetoric of each other, and then they creatively try to implement it in their own countries, and sometimes they are successful, and therefore we have quite similar rhetorics, at least on a superficial level, all around Europe. Thank you, and the world.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands. Are there other contributions to the discussion, questions to the speakers? You are welcome to participate. Well, let me In that case, put one question, maybe to the ambassadors, but others can also make guesses. While preparing for this seminar, I was wondering how well this declaration is known across the Muslim world, or is it rather, has it stayed as an exercise of the leaders and the learned? Any views on this one?
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Yes, we refer to this declaration in all our discussions, and especially in our initiatives to promote the interfaith tolerance. As I mentioned at the beginning, we really need to see a wider implementation and this promotion of this declaration. This is from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is very encouraging, what you are saying.
Yes, can I add something, Madam, please?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor again. Yes, first of all, I have to apologize again for Mr. Kostas. He has, I think there is something urgent issue because we talked just yesterday and he sent me his note. So, but I don't know what has happened this morning. I'm really sorry about that. But yet, from his notes, I have an answer from his notes. Actually, I allow myself to use some content because he was asked to say something about the implementation the implementation of the declaration. Yes, of course, it is a reference in our everyday discourse. Yet the content of the declaration and its message is one of the messages of the Islam itself. It's one of the contents, the messages that are enshrined in the declaration are yet a part of the moderate and open Islam, the Malikite Islam. So everywhere where there is any discourse, where there is any at schools, for example, at schools, because I think we missed somewhere the very important of education for the dissemination of the declaration. Education system in Morocco, for example, last year we added, yet in our constitution there is a part, for example, for the Hebraic law, and in our constitution there is this kind of reference to the global reference to how the interdialogue and the intercultural and inter-civilization dialogue with our culture and identity is yet marked by the messages and the content of the declaration. The other thing is that it is now in our education courses. It is included everywhere, but not as such as a declaration as a reference, but the messages and the contents that it holds. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would also like to remind everyone that you can also put questions on the chat function if you don't like to speak yourself, but I encourage you to share your views. So the raise hand function, you find it under reactions, and the chat is a separate little note. Mr. Ali, you wanted to say something?
Yes, definitely. This is actually a follow-up question to your question. The question is actually for both Madam Ambassador and Mr. Ambassador. Well, you already answered how well known this declaration is in your countries. Obviously, public servants are well aware of this declaration. But then, what about the among the people, and especially within the schooling system? Have you got human rights education, human and fundamental rights education schools where this declaration might also be included? This is just out of interest. Thank you.
To be honest with you, I'm not aware if this declaration is part of the education system. I'll check and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. This is a very good question, and I apologize for not having the answer for it.
May I just add something, if you allow me, please? Yeah, as I already mentioned, in Morocco, we have specific courses for human rights education, which is included in, first of all, in education and on all public sectors. For example, for lawmakers, the department in all lawmakers departments, example, security services, there is a courses of human rights which is included and updated whenever there is need for that. The declaration itself, but its messages, its content exists already before even the existence of in our education system. So it is in the courses. It is from primary school until the university. We have this kind of specific message about the reality and the good and correct lecture of religious messages. So it exists already before even the declaration, and when the declaration it comes, it is now referenced to as an event that was held in Morocco, and its message is now, for example, promoted and disseminated, distributed in universities in specific, for example, in the Moroccan Institute for the Education of Imams and Murshids that is present in Morocco and in many countries in Africa, and it has good cooperation with European countries, many European countries. In that, the declaration itself and as I mentioned, its message and objectives are, of course, are there. Thank you.
Can I add to my question, to my answer, please?
Yes, please, go ahead, go ahead.
Yes, I answered about the declaration in specific, but of course, we have a lot of awareness programs for school children and for society in general. As I said, the values of tolerance and the respect of the diversity is a very important thing in the UAE society. So it's part of the education system, it's part of the social awareness system, and a lot of initiatives we have. It's part of the mosque, and it's part of our society in general. This is a very important and a serious matter in the UAE society. So we do focus on the awareness programs to not only school children, but to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think it's fair to say that it's not an accident that this excellent declaration has been initiated by the United Emirates and the Kingdom of Morocco, who both have a very good reputation in being tolerant societies in this Muslim world. Any other hands up? All right, yes. Ambassador Heino, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It has been very valuable points and discussions which I have heard this morning and I was glad to hear that the Bishop Kalliala, you have been thinking through this issue of interfaith dialogue in the way you have been doing. So I would be glad if you could send your address to me, because there were very good points. And for example, your idea about the importance of promoting wider culture of peace. This is really something I think which we have to pay more attention to and to see how we can engage more people into this kind of thinking. Namely, there is not really an international forum which would have its focus on this very issue. I mean political culture for peace building. There are many kinds of conferences and organizations which have other kinds of focuses and more specific or more broader, but nothing in this field really. So I think we need to think more about this general political culture for peace and the role which different kinds of actors have in this. It's so obvious that this is needed, but it's not often in the focus. And I think this will be one of the debates when we start looking at what happened, what went wrong in Afghanistan, really after so many years and so many efforts and so many resources, and what went wrong there. And this is a good opportunity to discuss what is needed for a lasting peace finally, and it is of course a nation building and a certain political culture and education and a long-term view and but there are many questions and not many answers after that. So I don't have a question really, but I would just want to thank for all this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think we are all very impressed and grateful for the contributions of the speakers to this seminar. You, Ambassador Heino, just asked about Carlo Kalliala's intervention. I would like to ask any other speaker who has written up texts or good notes, please could you share them with us? We can post them on the website, because very fruitful and important views and information that we have been able to listen to this morning.
Ambassador Ashkelou.
Ambassador Ashkelou, you want to say something?
Thank you very much again. I just wanted to make a very simple clarification about the declaration. Because when I hear the questions, and I already had the pleasure to participate in a similar seminar in Germany when it was translated into German language. The same questions are, it gives the feeling that all the contents and the messages of the declaration started when the conference took place in January 2016. But I think the context at that time was what was happening in our region, what was happening with the ISIS phenomenon, all the atrocities that we have seen at that time. So the context was that one. And the organizers thought about holding such a conference. But in our societies, in Muslim societies, I thank you for mentioning that, Morocco and then Arab Emirates and other countries, these principles are rooted in our history for a long time, in our nation. So the implementation, and maybe the declaration came as a document maybe that gathers all those, but they existed. That's why I just wanted to clarify this point of view about the question concerning the declaration. It's not new in our society, at least when I'm talking about Morocco. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You have well filled in your colleagues and country person's absence, and we are grateful for that. Now, are there any hands up? I don't see more. We have a few minutes to close up the meeting, and for that purpose, I would like to invite Mr. Atik Ali to take the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Anya. And thank you for all the speakers, and also thank you for all the people who were capable of participating in this seminar via Zoom, and we have streamed this to YouTube, and afterwards it can be seen there as well. We would not be here without the Kingdom of Morocco or the United Arab Emirates, because they were the initiators of the conference which made the declaration in January 2016. But we would not be here if this declaration had not been translated into the Finnish language. And my thanks for this go naturally to Bishop Carlo Kalliala and Carlo Yrttiaho, who made this translation into Finnish language possible. Almost in every speech which was held today was mentioned the utmost importance of the declaration today. We need these kind of declarations more than ever. And as Ambassador Heino mentioned, religion is connected to many international issues and to many international crises. And he mentioned a figure of 60% of conflicts. In 60% of conflict, religion is involved. In many speakers also pointed out that the religious literacy and better understanding of religion is also of importance. Some put it in other words. For example, Bishop Karliala mentioned recognizing distinctions in religious traditions, which in other words is religious literacy. Ambassador Heino also mentioned that the foreign policy of Finland is protection of freedom of religion or belief, and that the Finnish foreign policy is human rights based. And this is true, but this is not the whole truth, to be honest. And at this time, I would like to take the opportunity of thanking all the people working with the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs for ongoing and continuous support for the Muslim and Jewish minorities in Finland in issues such as non-medical circumcision of males and the very current thing with the restrictions in dietary restrictions for religious minorities. You have helped me personally more than all Muslims combined in Finland for the past 5-6 years. Thank you for this. We need to do something, and what to do. For example, as Carlo Calliala mentioned, few people in Finland are aware of the attitude of Islam toward minorities. So the core forum needs now to do is to spread this, distribute this translation in Finnish language to people so that they would know, for example, what is the Medina Charter. But what other things we need to do is that we need to keep going on with this interfaith and intrafaith dialogue of ours, which has been ongoing process for 10 years. But that's only part of the truth, since we have had religious leaders of Finland gathering now for 20 years. And prior to this, we have had an ongoing interfaith dialogue between the Muslims, the Jewish people, and the Christian people for more than 100 years in Finland. So this is something we need to do, keep doing. But I believe the solution to one, if I want to point out something, one thing we need to do and which might have the most effect, and that is the fundamental and human rights education, which would include training, awareness raising, information, activities, which increase the awareness of fundamental and human rights. This seminar in part, and this translation is just part of this kind of human rights education, but we need this even more. Second thing, in what I have in concrete, that unfortunately Dr. Kostas was not here with us concerning the implementation of the declaration. Mr. Ambassador, of course, explained us how the implementation is going, but I'm going to raise a question. As you all know that, for example, the European Convention of Human Rights, we have the European Court of Human Rights, which interprets the paragraphs of the convention. Similar thing, International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights. There's a body monitoring the implementation of this covenant, and that's called the Human Rights Committee. So my question is that shouldn't we also have a similar system or a mechanism which would monitor in a similar way, or maybe a bit different way, the Marrakesh Convention as declaration as well? This is something if you have any ideas on this one, actually, we have still some time. I would really like to hear your comments on this. That shouldn't there be an organ or a body to monitor the declaration? Thank you.
Thank you, Atik. We not only had a summary and questions, but we had some creative ideas. So I do hope that this seminar will produce some results in way of awareness raising in our country. And concerning this declaration and its Finnish translation, I understand this is now on the website of USKOT-foorumi for anyone to read in Finnish.
Yeah, it's a link in chat.
So we have now had a very nice 2 hours of excellent contributions and good questions. I would like to thank all the speakers and participants to the seminar from attending and for your interest. And I hope that we can have similar events even in the future.